The European Union is in deep crisis.
It is like you have a knife on your throat.
The very future of the euro hangs in the balance.
You cannot simply tell somebody, this is the gun, commit suicide.
The predictions are becoming ever more dire.
Greece can be the Lehman Brothers of Europe.
Critics say it's clear this project has failed.
The euro was an economic statement, it was sheer nonsense.
But could this crisis be an opportunity?
No single currency in the world can work without a federal state.
New elections are shifting the balance of power. Can this man make the difference? Or is someone else calling the shots? But whatever they decide, will it be too little, too late?
This is Empire.
Hello and welcome to Empire. I am Marwan Bishara. You've probably heard many facts and figures over the past 2 years. But the figure you need to know is 19. That's the number of emergency summits convened by European leaders to resolve their crisis. But none has worked out. At the center of the current crisis is this. Nothing symbolizes Europe's dreams and unfolding nightmare than the euro. That's why we're starting our European journey here, in Brussels, the seat of the European project, to try to answer some fundamental questions. Who led Europe into this crisis? Who can lead it out? Is this the center of European power, or is it Paris, Berlin, and London? To discuss this and more, I'll be joined inside the Parliament by former Greek Foreign Minister and European Parliament member Dimitrios DROUTSAS and his fellow MEP from Spain, RAUL ROMEVA. But first, a quick reminder of how we got here in the first place.
It's easy to forget that the grand vision for European Union was born from the ashes of destruction. Before the 20th century was even halfway over, millions were left dead from two calamitous European wars. The first generation of post-war leaders had to find a way to prevent a third. Their plan was to bind this continent together against dangers from without and the all too obvious dangers from within. The project has always been profoundly ambitious. The common market and the European community were put in place first. And following the collapse of communism and a reunited Germany, those leaders saw the chance for the next leap. One continent, one currency. And so the euro was born.
The process is underway, and I think it's irreversible, and it will lead us to economic and monetary union.
A monetary union with one currency is now a fact of life.
Its detractors, however, have always maintained the plan contained a fundamental flaw.
The euro was a very brave and bold political statement, but as an economic statement, it was sheer nonsense.
The reason, say the critics, is that a one-size-fits-all currency can't possibly work. The failure to reconcile the different economic and national realities of Europe's nations lies at the heart of the crisis. And what we're witnessing now is a profound disagreement by the new generation of leaders on how to fix this underlying problem.
You've set up a currency system which has fatal flaws that everybody is simply ignoring. Certainly Mrs. Merkel is fully aware of them, but everybody else just wishes that they would go away. Now that is no way to run a country, it's no way to run a union, it's no way to run a currency.
What was first merely an economic crisis has become, in the words of former German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer, an existential crisis. One which now threatens the entire European Union project. That's left today's European leaders with a profound political problem to reckon with. How to persuade the millions of impoverished citizens that this project was a good idea in the first place.
Dimitrios, Raul, welcome to Empire.
Thank you.
Listening to the news, traveling around Europe, it sounds like, or the assumption is, that you, meaning Greece and Spain, are the problem. Are you the problem in Europe?
Do you really think so?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people think so, and maybe this is the real problem that we are facing, that somehow there is a tendency of hiding oneself behind his own finger. And please don't misunderstand me. I want to be very clear. I'm not hiding myself behind my own finger. For the situation in Greece, this very difficult situation we are facing, we are responsible ourselves in Greece because of the way politics used to behave and to deal with things in the past 3.5 decades. I don't need to dwell into that. Clientelistic systems, things not working well, a huge bureaucracy, huge administration, all those things came together, and now we are facing the bill that was presented to us. So there are no misunderstandings. I fully acknowledge the fact that we are responsible ourselves for the situation we are finding ourselves in. What Greece needs and what the Greek people need is, first of all, respect, acknowledgement that the Greek people are trying. They have been suffering. There have been huge sacrifices in the past 2.5 years. This must be acknowledged, and we all must sit together on the same table and see how we can overcome the crisis. It's not about threatening or saying, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. We know our mistakes. Now it's time to see what we can do together. And when I say together, I certainly mean, first of all, the European Union, but of course also the whole of the international community.
I want to get to the European Union. Raul, you think, or are the Spanish leaders, the Spanish leadership, acknowledging as the Greek leadership their responsibility in the crisis?
I think that every country has its own part of responsibility on the internal level. Obviously, in Greek has a dimension that is specifically Greek. In Spain, it's exactly the same situation. In Ireland, probably you would find other aspects that would be, let's say, internal problems that need to be solved. But there is also another dimension of this, is the European dimension of the whole problem. I mean, you cannot say that the problem like the Greek or the Spanish or the Ireland or Portugal or whatever is simply something that is isolated from this European Union project. It's part of it. And historically, the other member states have been taking profit of the situation in Spain, in Greece, and many other countries. So there is a co-responsibility in a way, in a part of the dimension, in a part of a problem. On the other side, I also understand there is also a question of timing. And Dimitris is absolutely right when he says this. You cannot simply tell somebody, this is the gun, commit suicide. That's completely unacceptable, not only because it's simply something that is not going to give any solution, it's simply something that is going to not happen.
And the gun is a metaphor for austerity, pressure?
Measures. When you are telling somebody, you have to apply these measures that you know that are killing that people, that population, that society, you're simply asking them to commit suicide.
So why did the Spanish government and the Greek government accept those diktats?
Wait, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. But what I understand is important is that we overcome the Spanish dimension or the Greek dimension, and we start thinking about the European solution. There is no solution if there is no European solution. And it's not me who's saying this. It was Jacques Delors in that moment when he said, you want an euro, fine, but you will not have an euro if you don't have at the same time a union, a fiscal union, a banking union. That's what we lack now, and that's what we need in order to overcome the situation.
It sounds familiar, Dimitrios. Political union first. Why put the cart in front of the horse?
Certainly, and personally I'm very much in favor of going further into European integration and doing things much faster.
Are the Greeks too, by the way?
Marwan, that's a very interesting point you are tackling here, because Greece and the Greek people used to be one of the most pro-European countries in the European Union. You can imagine that in the past 2.5 years, with all these developments, with what happened, the feelings of the Greek towards the European Union are not so positive anymore. But I think that if we explain things to the Greek people again in the right manner, if the Greek people see that things are changing, that the European Union is changing rhetoric, is changing policy, is really trying to help, then the pro-European character of the Greek people will come out very
So you don't think
soon.
we missed an opportunity there?
Unfortunately, we have been missing a lot of opportunities in the past. The whole of the European Union has missed a lot of opportunities. And let me tell you one thing. Because we feel in Europe, and we as European parliamentarians, we certainly feel it much more. We feel that the European citizen is going more and more away from the European Union, the so-called Euroscepticism, to bring in a modern word in European Union.
So you feel more Greek and you feel more Spanish than you feel European?
The national element is again much stronger. But this is also because a lot of big decisions, huge decisions for the development of the European Union were taken some sort of behind closed doors by the leaders of government, by the leaders of the member states, without really asking and involving the European citizen in all those decisions.
Yes, go ahead.
No, actually, that's what I think is an important point. We are usually talking about the economical crisis, the financial crisis, that's true. But the most important crisis you have to face is the democratic crisis. And
you don't think Europe is democratic enough?
Not enough. I mean, when we talk about these democratic...
Why? Because European Parliament, for example, is irrelevant?
No, that's putting the way in the other extreme. I think my position is that it's not yet as let's say, decisive as it should be. Let's put it in an example. In one member state, you have the capacity of ruling the economy because you have a central bank that is ruling basically the currency. In the European Union, you cannot do this. The central bank has not this power. On the other side, politically speaking, there is a lack of confidence on the way some decisions are taken. I mean, we are seeing that the parliament is absolutely crucial in many of the decisions that are taken, but there is this kind of feeling that the ones who really decide in Europe are Berlin and basically Madame Merkel, and up until now it was Sarkozy. Is this perception that who are these people deciding for everybody without having been voted for?
Let me give you another example with the banking sector. Coming back to my country, Greece. As it is well known, we have received very generous support, financial support by our EU partners and also the IMF. But let me tell you that not a single euro from this support went to Greek society.
Where did it go?
It went in order to save and support the banking system that had big troubles.
Notably French and Germany?
As well.
Also, as well. When we are talking about the banking system, it's an international network, so we all know that.
Speaking of solutions, I read that one of your proposals have long been that the Europe Central Bank needs to step in and borrow money at a low interest in order to support some of those struggling economies. Do you think the Germans will go for that?
That's a good question, and you should ask this Madame Merkel when you have the chance. As I said, more decisive action is needed. It's not only up to the European Central Bank to decide, it is also up to the member states to take this
Member
action.
states or France and Germany?
Well, we can discuss about this.
I mean, we want to put our finger on the pain here.
We can discuss about this very, very frankly. You see, and you are absolutely right, the past 2.5 years, in all these efforts to tackle the crisis, 2 member states were decisive. Or let me put it maybe in a less diplomatic way, 1.5 member states were decisive. Germany and some sort of France. And yes, this is also an open point of criticism that I make. Germany and the leadership of Germany was not up to the task. Unfortunately, we see this from the results. You cannot take a program that, for instance, fits to a country like Germany and try to put it on another country like Greece, like Spain, Ireland, Portugal, or whoever else.
And here we go back to the original, perhaps, problem that is facing Europe. That as soon as the first financial crisis hit the continent, there was no European Union.
Yes.
Everyone acted according to their own interests, especially the Germans.
Absolutely. I have to say as well in that sense, because we need to be fair. I understand, I don't share, but I understand why the German, basically, I don't want to talk about Germany as such. I mean, I'm talking about Merkel, because she is the one who is leading. I mean, Germany is very big, and there is a lot of political opinions among several groups. But there is obviously this perception from the German tradition and political culture of perceiving the deficit as a problem in itself, as a sin, as something that has to be combated. And from that perspective, their problem is that they cannot simply understand why the deficit is something that it can be used in some critical circumstances. To me, the problem is not the deficit. The problem is how do you arrive to the deficit? What do you spend in order to get that deficit? Because some of the expenditures need to be done.
You mean whether it's infrastructure or it's consumerism?
Course. I mean, there are some expenditures that can be saved, but some others cannot. But let me finish this because that's important. And what I want to compare to this is that there is an economical deficit that is important, but what about the social deficit?
It sounds to me that you're, with all the crisis and now with all the accumulation, the debt and so on and so forth, you are basically losing a generation. You have basically lost.
That's the problem. I mean, if you don't, I repeat one figure, I know that figure are complicated, but 50% of youth unemployment in Spain. That's a very important data.
But you know, in order to be fair to the Germans, while you were increasing wages, while you were having a real estate bubble, while you were spending money on various things in Greece and Spain, the Germans froze their salaries, kept their inflation down, kept their debt down, and hence they're benefiting now when all the rest of the continent is in crisis. But they have a lot to profit from.
Let's be frank too. First, the Germans as well. I don't want to put this as a kind of German against the rest of the world. I mean, that's not the situation. But
one can argue it's the German banks against the German worker. I don't know. But certainly they've done that.
That might be, because on the other side, for instance, we have to admit as well that when Germany was doing profit was basically because the rest of Europe were buying things to him. So in that sense...
Certainly Germany benefited from the trade to the rest of Europe.
I mean, somebody needed...
Hugely.
Somebody needed to buy things from Germany. That's what they made the profits, and we bought and we are happy to keep buying things from Germany, which is something.
Shall we say naively bought things from Germany, or shall we say?
Or not? I mean, it's part
soberly?
It's part of the game. I mean, it's part of the game. But on the other side, I also would like to remind, Germany is very worried about the question of the deficit, and the debt. Let's remember that the two countries that first broke the rules that they imposed in terms of deficit and debt were Germany and France.
That's in 2003 or so.
Exactly.
So it's not so long time ago.
But
history is important to remind as well when they blame somebody off.
They were the first to break the rules.
And they did, precisely because they were in a crisis.
Raul, Dimitrios, be that as it may, in the end of the day, as we look for solutions and for the central bank to step in and so on and so forth, and instead, Greece is left at the mercy of the IMF. Even Egypt refused to take the sort of loans you took from the IMF. And second, the European Union is able to do nothing about it because in the end of the day, the Bundestag counts more than the European Parliament.
That's a problem.
There's certainly a problem, but let's look a little bit back how things developed, Marwan. When we in Greece were faced with this situation, and we had to turn to our partners for support. The European Union, at that time, 2.5 years ago, don't forget this, the European Union didn't have any kind of tool, any kind of supporting mechanism ready as we have it now. The European Union, I will be very frank, and I will say it openly, was not prepared to tackle such a crisis. Also, Germany, Madame Merkel, was not really prepared. We had to learn. Europe had to learn how to tackle it. And it was also a request by EU partners, and especially Angela Merkel, to say, when we were building up this mechanism of support in the European Union, to also bring in the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the so-called Troika, to be part of the so-called Troika. Why? The argumentation was because we as European Union do not have the experience, the IMF has the experience, so we should have them in and on board. This is why we also turned to the IMF. Marwan, let me also clarify one thing. When you are facing bankruptcy as a country, when you are facing those huge problems that you have created also yourself, but you are facing bankruptcy and nobody is really willing to help you. It is like you have a knife on your throat. You know what people in the corridors always say about Angela Merkel? She's always coming a quarter of an hour too late. Because we are waiting too long to take decisions.
But I'm just wondering...
Proposals were put, the first reaction, no, then the crisis is developing further, we reconsider, and then we do things that we could have done long time ago.
How do you then feel about the election of Francois Hollande? Is this a game changer for Greece and Spain and the rest of Europe?
It changed the rules. We need to overcome this debate of the austerity measures as the solution of everything. And that's what I understand Hollande is putting on the table. The austerity measures by themselves are not the solution at all.
Neither is growth by itself.
Neither is growth by itself, but austerity might provoke more problems than solving them. And that's the message that needs to be explained everywhere.
And that gives you hope of that maybe Europe is turning a corner?
Certainly. Francois Hollande, I belong to the same political family, the Social Democrats, so certainly I have very much hope after the election of Francois Hollande as President of France. But I also want to be a realist. I have been member of the Greek government, foreign minister. I know some sort of how things
You've been to the Elysee, as it were.
Also there. So there is hope, and I'm certain that, and we already see a mind change, a change in the discussion, that a new discussion will begin, that the German dominance will not be so strong anymore. We are talking in the last months about a possible exit of member states. Why aren't we coming back to our rhetoric of the past when we spoke about enlarging the European Union, the Balkans and other regions? We must come back to this positive scenario.
On this ambitious note, sobering as well, RAUL, DIMITRIOS, thank you for joining Empire.
Thank you.
While all this might be true, just as there are two sides to every coin, there is more than one side to this story. And for that, we go to Paris.
The European history since 50 years has always been a move of deepening integration through crisis.
That and much more after we come back from a news break. Welcome back. The socialist victory in France's presidential elections could be the game changer that Europe so desperately needs. Across this continent, citizens are demanding their leaders rethink the way forward. But just as everyone would like to take a deep breath to try and figure out a way to reconcile their differences, time is running out. Some predict the collapse of the euro within 3 months if its member states can't agree on how to deal with the economic crisis. And that's why Francois Hollande could prove to be the man of the moment. He won the presidency for two key reasons. He promised to scale back many of the austerity measures introduced by Nicolas Sarkozy, and he made clear the relationship with Germany will have to change. In a moment, I will sit down with the men who helped guide Francois Hollande to the Élysée Palace. But first, a quick look at this key European relationship.
The smile is the same. The handshake is the same. Indeed, the outfit is the same. But the man in the suit is different, and that changes everything. The first meeting between Francois Hollande and Angela Merkel was described as cordial, but a bit frosty. And if that came as a bit of a surprise, well, that's exactly what the people of France wanted to see. And the message he delivered is what they wanted to hear.
Je voulais renégocier ce qui
I want to renegotiate certain points to add a dimension of growth. Gone are the days of the overly friendly relationship between Hollande's predecessor and Chancellor Merkel, one that was ridiculed as far too deferential. By rejecting Nicolas Sarkozy for a second term, the people of this country have exposed a paradox at the heart of Franco-German relations. But the German vision of Europe is not at all the same as the French vision. Hollande doesn't want Brussels to be synonymous with Berlin, and he's vowed to reintroduce the French socialist approach at the highest level. Specifically, he has made clear the austerity program endorsed by Germany isn't good enough. Greece is on its knees, many of its people reduced to handouts and charity just to survive. And while Hollande says agreements must be honored, he also says enough is enough.
En revanche, ma responsabilité.
I see it as my responsibility to send a signal to the Greeks. He calls for an end to savage spending cuts and for a massive increase in state-sponsored stimulus programs to wrench not just Greece but all of Europe once and for all out of a downward economic spiral. Hollande is well aware that within the framework of the EU, France reaps enormous benefits, fighting well above its economic weight. But that doesn't mean French citizens see Germany as de facto leader of the entire Union. It means they want a leader who can stand up to the Bundestag. And while it might appear counterintuitive, this approach has actually worked in the past. Relations between François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl were famously difficult in the 1980s, but between them, they set the entire EU project in motion. This partnership of opposites stretches back decades, from de Gaulle to Pompidou, through to Chirac. The hands-off policy paid dividends. Instead of hiding this paradox of diplomacy, Hollande is emphasizing it. At the very least, France has decided it's not going to be dragged around anymore.
Although the game may be about to change with the socialists back in the Élysée Palace, President Hollande has been widely criticized for being strong on optimism, weak on specifics. That's why I sat down with one of his key economic advisors, Philippe AGHION, and began by asking him whether tighter economic integration is indispensable.
I think there is no future, I think, for the euro area without increased integration. So which means in particular that I believe that in the longer term, countries have to renounce part of their budgetary power, I mean individual member states. For example, at the minimum, allow that, that the budget of the countries be monitored by a European institution.
You speak of harmonization or normalizations of standards, but many accuse France and Germany of being the first, for example, to increase the ceiling on their deficit back in 2003.
Absolutely.
So France and Germany are not exactly playing by the rules that they are imposing on others.
Exactly. And I think that's the limits of the sanctions mechanism. I think, if the sanctions becomes too tough, the strong countries within the zone can say, look, let's renegotiate. You see what I mean? That's why I prefer to have instead, or at least as a complement, ex-ante mechanism where you would tell a country your budget cannot fly, you cannot implement it because it doesn't fly. You have to come back with another budget.
Then how can we have a European harmonization, standardization, euro mechanism when with the first crisis, Germany says hands out?
No, because I will tell you, Germany, things are changing in Germany. They had their period of angriness and punishment, and now they understand that they know there is something called Lehman Brothers. You don't want to repeat the Lehman Brothers mistake. You see, the pretext was moral hazard. The famous word moral hazard. If we are nice to one country, other countries will cheat, etc. Yeah. But Lehman Brothers, we know what happened after Lehman Brothers, and Greece can be the Lehman Brothers of Europe. So now there are more and more people in Germany. Tell Mrs. Merkel, look. You cannot have German prosperity if the rest of Europe is in ruin.
So how much is that a French wish? How much is that wishful thinking? Because with all respects to France, many think that it really has very little influence over Germany. It is a junior partner.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that, you know, Germany is a much stronger economy and therefore the bargaining power is greater than that of France. But I think France can play on the following things. Germany, now more and more people in Germany, in particular the Socialist Party in Germany, and you see Hollande is very close to the Socialist Party in Germany, the SPD, Social Democrat Party. They now very aware, they realize that Germany cannot grow in the long run if they are surrounded by other European countries in recession.
But that's all the reason why Merkel is not going to cooperate with Holland. It certainly doesn't want the...
No, because you see, she went through the elections that she lost.
I mean, that's a regional.
Yes, but you need a warning. Huh? And more people, even in Germany, become aware that if you keep the course as it is now without doing anything on growth, the euro is threatened. And if the euro is threatened, Germany has a lot to lose with the euro. So far, the policy of Germany has been to say, I do the minimum I need to do, subject to maintaining the euro. Germany knows that it has to lose a lot with the euro. Why? Because it exports a lot to the rest of the euro area and also to other European countries. If the euro ceases to exist, France and other countries can devalue their currency. And of course, the export capabilities of Germany will go down a lot. And the second thing is that Germany has a lot of assets in euros. The value of these assets will go down a lot if the euro disappears. So I think more and more people now in Germany becomes aware of that. You see what I mean?
Could we say that Germany needs the euro more than the euro needs Germany?
I think yeah, we could say at least that Germany needs as much the euro as the euro needs Germany, certainly, and they know it. They badly need the euro.
It multiplies their force, their power, their trading capacity?
Absolutely.
And within Europe itself?
And within Europe itself.
Do you think Greece is better off without the euro? Do you think euro is better off without Greece?
But I think the cost would be very high for both, because you see the problem is that for Greece, all investors would go, already they leave and all would go, and it would take very long for Greece to recover. For the rest, it's true, of course, people say, but if they leave the Eurozone, they can devalue. But as I told you, they could do fiscal devaluation. You see, there are other ways of doing a devaluation, a real devaluation, without having to leave the Eurozone.
Do you think if Greece leaves, Portugal and Spain will follow?
No, but there will be the fear that they will. You see, there will be enormous tension.
Why would they do that?
Tension.
It's the Argentine, it's the Iceland examples. What is it about leaving the euro that would look so attractive?
No, it's not that. You know, France, for example, has lent like 80 billion euros to Greece, so that it will lose. So that's not good. And Germany as well has lent a lot. So that's not good for these countries. And also, people will anticipate that Portugal and Spain will not be helped either. Do you see what I mean?
I have a bit of a problem with that we keep talking about the default of the Greeks, of the Spaniards, and not about the injustice of this inequality within Europe.
Yeah.
Bringing everyone on board while some are aristocrats and the others are the peasants in the system. And as we said earlier, the idea that you're not making this equitable, as it were, equal in terms of opportunities and so on and so forth, the Greeks and the Portuguese will always fall behind.
But it depends what you do. If you give them some margins on the macro side and you have a big policy of investment, you can, within the US, within the US, Alabama is not California. It's a fact.
Philippe, the problem with this federalization or evolution towards federalization is that there have been elections in 11 countries now in Europe, and most of them are dissatisfied with how Europe has functioned thus far. So Europe is not exactly popular among Europeans. What will be done soon in order then to put Europe back on track? I
don't know what will be done. I know what should be done. You should democratize Europe. Europe should belong. You see, the problem is that the model that Sarkozy, for example, and Merkel were pushing was the model of heads of state meeting, and they decide for everybody. I think Europe should be owned by the populations. To own them, that's why I need the European Commission should be the executive power and should be responsible in front of the parliament.
Maybe nationalism is more important than economics in Europe?
But on the other hand, people know where that leads. There is a memory. So it's true that the current generation is no longer the generation that fought the war. But still
it takes everything for granted.
But still they remember. You see, it was very interesting, this election in France, where you had some kind of xenophobic themes that surfaced during the campaign. And I saw a number of people from the right reacting against, kind of demagogical use of these themes, and all the statements by right-wing leaders in France trying to banalize the extreme right to make them appear like normal, a totally normal party, and that frightened a number of people on the center right, actually. So
you could say that most Europeans are still
absolutely
within for Europe.
Yes, absolutely. Because they know they don't know. There is a historical memory.
For more on Europe's future and what Paris and Berlin need to do next, I sat down with one of the few people who knows intimately how this relationship works, the former right-hand man to François Mitterrand, Jacques Attali. Monsieur Attali, welcome to Empire. Europe is in turmoil, and the euro is, of course, under threat. You've kind of predicted this, that euro will face such difficulties. What has gone wrong?
The European history since 50 years has always been a move of deepening integration through crisis. We had a crisis in '58 because countries could not develop without exporting, and then we created the common market after a huge crisis. The common market didn't work enough, and then we had another crisis, and we created in '84 the single market. The single market could not work because we have competitive devaluation, and then we created the single currency. And we knew at that moment that no single currency in the world can work without a federal state. There is no example in the world of a currency without a state to back it. And then we are now in this crisis where either we'll move to federal Europe or euro will disappear.
So then we are in that sense in the midst of crisis, because as you're saying, no monetary union without political union. And as far as I can read the European political map, Europeans do not want political union.
Well, you cannot say that. French want political union, Netherlands want political union, Spain, Italy want political union, and even in Germany, Social Democrats want federalism, which is the way to name political union.
But then they vote against it when the referendum came about a few years ago.
In Europe, we move when it is needed on a rational basis. And today, I would say that federalism is a technical must and not a political dream.
So you don't think they put the cart in front of the horse by introducing the monetary union before the political union?
No, that's always the way we work in Europe. We create the necessity of a next stage. Actually, I was one of the negotiators of the Maastricht Treaty, and I know very well how it worked. It would have been impossible to create a political federalism at that time from scratch. Impossible. The only way was to move on a rational deepening of economic integration. And now we are at a moment of truth. This rational, deepened economic integration lead definitely to the question of political integration.
I just want to get back to the idea of the necessity, because you said we create the necessity and then we create the political will. For me, this sounds like we're putting the Europeans on the spot. We put them in a situation whereby they have to vote for a European superstructure that in some ways, for many of them, negates their own nationals.
Let's look at what is the situation now. The Germans do not know that if the Greek quit the Eurozone, the worst victim will be Germany. They believe that they can survive, that it will be better, that Greece is just a problem and headache, and then let's get those lazy people out. It's not true.
You want a United States of Europe of sort.
I think it's only the rational solution. It's not an ideology. I think it's a rational solution. If we don't have that, we will collapse. We in Europe are in a much better situation than the Americans. Much better situation, economically. And the only reason why the Americans are so strong is that they have a federal state that we don't have.
Realistically, you think it's feasible?
We will know that in the next 6 months.
France had just had an election. The French have spoken. What is it exactly that you've heard?
We want more Europe and less austerity. We want less austerity because it doesn't work. We want more Europe because we in France that Europe is a solution.
Is this a similar message to what you heard when you were there 30-some years ago next to François Mitterrand when he beat another conservative president who was an incumbent back in 1980?
Yes, it's exactly that. And actually we moved and we did the single market and we did the single currency. We did two of the steps that lead to where we are now.
And at the time you introduced François Hollande to the presidency of François Mitterrand.
I took him in my staff. He was one of my very brilliant member of my team, and then he followed in his career.
Let's talk about Franco-German relations. Are you as pessimistic as some about the Hollande-Merkel relations?
No, of course not. I mean, I saw that many times. French and Germans are bound to agree, and those guys are going to agree. The only problem I see is, will the Germans consider Europe as a solution or as a problem? And Mrs. Merkel is not a natural pro-European. You know, the German leaders before were still remembering the war, their guilt. Now they have forgotten that. And they are say, okay, it's finished, let's talk about something else. And we think about Germany first. And they have a lot of work to do in order to understand that there is no German future without a strong Europe.
But don't you think they are also taking over Europe in a new sort of way?
No, I mean, not at all.
They're not dictating? Or the Franco-German relations axes are not dictating to the rest of Europe?
That's something else. French and Germans are the dominating nations in Europe.
That's not very democratic, right?
Well, I mean, you need to have leaders.
But you must agree that Sarkozy and Merkel did dictate the austerity plan to the rest of Europe.
No, dictate is not true. Dictate is not true.
What would you use as a verb?
Lead.
It's more than lead.
No, lead. Lead. I mean, when you have 27 nations around the table and you have a Malta prime minister, if he says no, he says no.
I guess that's what's changed since the Mitterrand years. In the Mitterrand years, it was a small Europe, it was manageable Europe. Does France and Germany realize that today we're talking about 27, 28 members?
Yes, it's why it's much more difficult, and it's why we need to move to federalism in order to have a real. We live in a modern world where we need quick and efficient decisions, and if we stay with a decision-making process that need unanimity for any important issue, we will go nowhere.
So that Europe that made sense after the Second World War, that Europe that is important vis-a-vis the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians and so on and so forth, you think that's becoming secondary to certain Europeans?
No. Europeans are happy, wealthy, and if they could stay as it is, they will say it's fine. As always, I mean, including us in our personal life. When we are healthy, wealthy, why change? No reason to change. You change only on a threat, when you have a threat.
By necessity also, as you were saying.
It's a threat. Threat or necessity is the same.
Yes.
And there is a threat today. And actually, why did we build Europe in the 50s? Because of a threat of the Soviets, the threat of the Germans, etc. We build Europe. Now we have a new threat, collapse.
I want to talk about that, and I would like us to end with this. So now we have these two alternatives, I guess. One is collapse because of this idea of contagion, Greece, and maybe followed by Spain, Portugal, and so on and so forth. And the idea that you're advocating, which is a federal Europe. Because the fait accompli, or the state as is today, the status quo, the status quo doesn't work.
Exactly.
It has to go one way or another.
I will take the metaphor of a bike. If you are on a bike, if you stop pedaling, it doesn't matter.
Fall. So you think it is indispensable for Europe to move
It's why
forward.
I say federalism is not an ideology or something I'm advocating. Yes. It's something I'm explaining as the only rational way of keeping what exists already.
Tell our viewers around the world, Jacques Attali, what does it really mean to you? Is it means a president for Europe, a parliament for Europe, and chief of staff of a European military?
We have already a parliament, we have already a president. What we don't have is tax and capacity to raise finance to finance growth. What we need is capacity to finance growth. That will be done either through using the existing resources of the central bank and the European Commission, or through, and more than that, Eurobonds, and backed by a very small European revenues. There is no state without tax. That's the case. If you are in a country with oil and all that, you can avoid. But when you are a country with no natural resources to do that, no country, no state without tax. That is missing. And when we have that at a very tiny level by transfer of existing tax, not by new tax, then we'll have a state.
But you must agree with me, when people deal with Barack Obama or Putin, for that matter, it's not like they're dealing with, what's his name, Rompuy, what's his name, Barroso. I mean, these are not real presidents.
Of course. On the long run, later on, we will have a real president.
And a real parliament.
And we have a real parliament.
I mean, in the sense that it will have legislative capacity for Europe.
Exactly. That will happen, or Europe will come back to a Middle Age.
Well, on that note, thank you for being with us. Clearly, the way back is not the way forward for Europe. The start of the 21st century might have been challenging, but no one wants a return to the beginnings of the 20th century. Dangerous as it might be, the rise of the nationalist right in Europe is more of a symptom of today's ills than a return to a past era. But Europeans shouldn't kid themselves. This is a zero-sum process. A more integrated, more united Europe means less national sovereignties. The quicker European leaders internalize this process and share it openly with their people will determine to a large degree whether this is the beginning of an economic depression or the birth pangs of a united, perhaps federal Europe. Disintegrate or integrate? Well, it's time to flip our euro. That's the way it goes. Write to me with your suggestions. Until next time.